is that they get punished and their contact is reduced if they actually show up at rallies like this, and that's very sad. I will continue without them to get our message across. Australian governments are forcibly removing more children per head of population than any other Western nation. We have a banner down there which outlines the statistics. New South Wales is responsible for this shocking statistic, with nearly half of all children in care removed by the state, and the Hunter region, where we are today, is the child stealing capital, as they remove most of the children in New South Wales. This is not a title to be proud of. It's one of great shame, causing immense harm and trauma to vulnerable children and families that will impact for the rest of their lives and for future generations. Over a decade ago, Emeritus Professor Dorothy Scott urged Australia to follow the European care system that focuses on preserving families, because the worldwide evidence for best practice proves that forced removal of children and forced adoptions do not ensure a safe, stable and loving home for life for vulnerable children, and the outcomes are far better for children, family and society when they are supported to remain safely at home. But Australia didn't listen, and they chose instead to copy the failed United States and United Kingdom systems, whereby they grab a child and they run and then place that child with strangers. If you've got any doubts at all that children are being stolen in this state on a daily basis, I urge you to go to the Senate inquiry into out-of-home care website and read submission number 27, written by a solicitor, one of the very few who actually has tried to defend parents for the past 6 years. And it describes exactly how children are stolen in the secret care courts due to the perverted interpretation and application of the care and protection legislation. His submission also highlights that the New South Wales government is breaking the government contract transparency laws by not publishing any of the contracts with NGOs since it sold children in out-of-home care. This year, the minimum price per child is $45,000. That's $1 billion of taxpayers' money with no transparency or accountability. So where's the Crime and Misconduct Commission investigation into Prue Goward, who masterminded the whole sell-off? No one should have the power to take children from their parents by force when they've not committed any crime and without evidence. Forced removals are heavy-handed, with armed police involved in most cases, traumatising children and parents for life. Parents are being arrested for resisting police just because they hold on to their frightened children and refuse to hand them over to strangers. Forced removals are still happening as a first resort, with no investigation taking place, no warnings to parents and no help or support offered. Forcibly removing children is the most drastic, costly and intrusive act a government can carry out. Legal aid solicitors are underfunded for care and protection matters, resulting in inadequate or at times no legal defence for parents. A recent trend is emerging where parents qualify for legal aid, but they have their grant refused on the grounds that the case has no merit. So traumatised parents are forced to try and defend themselves against unlimited Crown lawyers because an office clerk has prejudged their case. This is not justice. Appeals are not funded by legal aid, nor are most applications for restoration. So the children of the poor are stolen for the term of their childhood because their parents can't afford a good solicitor. Sadly, our governments have failed to learn the painful and destructive lessons of the past and have rapidly escalated the rate of child stealing in the last decade on the ludicrous probability that it's better to take a child because they might suffer a risk of harm at some time in the future with family, while at the same time they have failed to acknowledge the far greater evidenced harm to children forcibly removed and placed in the care of the government, especially with strangers. The federal government keeps apologising for the failures of the states. They said sorry to the stolen generations, sorry to forgotten Australians, of which I am one, and sorry for forced adoptions, as they acknowledge the overwhelming evidence of the damage their failed policies and had inflicted on one generation after another. With each federal apology, they promised that it would never happen again. But nothing's changed, because there's too much power and no accountability in the corrupt state and territory child protection industries that have failed since they were first established to achieve better outcomes for vulnerable children and families. Saying sorry for past abuse and failures is meaningless, while children are still being needlessly stolen. Deaths and abuse of children in care is still happening at an alarming rate and still being covered up in Australia's multi-billion-dollar child protection industry that caters to the whims of the profiteering stakeholders, not our children, and certainly not their families. Yet again, New South Wales and Victoria failed to provide the statistics on how many children were abused in care last year. But we do know that there was 500 reports of significant risk of harm to children in care in New South Wales a year ago, as the Director General, Coots Trotter, told the media that the reports had not been investigated at that time, nor for the 2 years prior since the report started to be received. There's no transparency or accountability with state child protection departments that refuse to publish the data for children who die and are abused in their care. And this sets the example for the NGOs and allows them to continue the cover-ups that have always been part of the secret child protection industry. They must be forced by law to publish the data of children who are abused and die in their care, including the alarming suicide rate of children and their parents, torn apart and destroyed by the current alienating tactics used by caseworkers. The right to information laws are denied in child protection matters, with a standard response to an application being a fraction of the case file and most pages are blank. And the reason given is that it's not in the best interest of the public to know. We believe it is in the best interest of the public to know about the breaches of law and the human rights violations and abuse of children and families by our governments. New South Wales is arguably the worst state of all, leading the nation with the incredibly high numbers of children in care and legislating neo-liberal social eugenics policies such as forced adoptions to dispose of the children they've stolen. Forced adoption of children in care has never stopped in Australia. It's just been hidden from the public, enacted in secret, and it's now time that this human rights atrocity was outlawed. But instead, Prue Goward and her friend Deborah Lee Furness, backed by the money of Prue Goward's former de facto son-in-law, James Packer, got together to do a deal that would benefit all of their agendas because they do not care about violating the human rights of vulnerable children and families so long as they get what they want. At the same time, Prue Goward gave what appeared to be a tearful apology to all those harmed by past forced adoptions. She was secretly drafting laws that condemn another generation to the same evidenced perpetual lifetime trauma caused by violating the birthrights of every child in care and their families. Child abuse does not discriminate. It's found in every class of society: domestic violence, substance abuse, mental health issues, disability, emotional, physical and sexual abuse and even neglect span all classes of Australian society. But only the marginalised, disadvantaged and the poor class, including the homeless, have their children forcibly removed because the rich can afford to buy justice. Deborah Lee Furness has announced several times last month that 11,000 babies were removed from their mothers last year in Australia. These alarming figures show that supply is underway for the well-off childless couples that want other people's children, and so is another stolen generation. Sir James Mumby, President of the United Kingdom Children's Court, has made several significant rulings in the past year in care and protection matters that have begun to improve justice in the United Kingdom for parents fighting for their children. In a directions ruling he made in September 2013 that clearly addressed the problems and the evidence of the wrongs of forced adoption, there has been a significant result and a dramatic slump in forced adoptions of children in the United Kingdom. Sir James Mumby realised there was inadequacy of reasoning and analysis put forward in support of forced adoptions by social services, and that it had to be halted. Too often there was sloppy practice with little or no evidence. And he said, where the proposal before a court is for non-consensual adoption, this issue is too grave. The stakes for all are too high for the outcome to be determined by rigorous adherence in an inflexible timetable, and justice is therefore denied. Thanks to Sir James Mumby in the United Kingdom, they're realising their mistakes and taking measures to correct them. While New South Wales, thanks to Prue Goward, she has now forced us down this failed and unjust and destructive path. In the United States,